Hello and welcome to this SlimDevOps episode 34. Sorry we're a bit late. If you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, this was originally recorded on twitch.tv/SlimDevOps on the 17th of February. If you would like to join in these sessions interactively, then head over to twitch.tv/SlimDevOps and you could join the likes of Big Pod and our podcast and Phil Clifford, who are already here in our chat. Right, welcome back everybody. So, how you doing, Pete?
Hey, I am doing great. I'm getting a little echo here, so I'm going to try to figure that out. But yeah, nice to see everybody, and thanks for joining us. A little issue getting started, but that's okay. Debugging's good.
Yeah, I've had some fun this afternoon, and I say fun, not fun at all. So we obviously stream this from my machine, and my whole machine was dead, kaput, finished and not functioning for a couple of hours. So I was experimenting with Docker Desktop. I've got a dual boot Windows partition. That's by the by. I was just having a play. And in the background, Windows 10 had decided that in order for me to be offered the Windows 11 upgrade, I needed some updates. So it did its usual thing of automatic updates, but it's got hooks into an app that's installed part of my motherboard support service, and it updated the motherboard BIOS in the background as well. And among other things, added TPM support so Windows 11 can work, but also completely changed all the PCI addressing of everything on the motherboard. So consequently, no graphics card, no storage, no capture devices. The machine was unbootable and a complete pickle. So I've had fun effectively reconfiguring the whole thing. So that was fun in air quotes, but we're here. I think it's working.
Yeah. Yeah, our podcast says, "Oh no," and I think that's the collective feeling.
Right.
A Windows 11 upgrade on a dual boot machine hours before needing to stream.
I didn't expect it to hose everything else, because I stream from the Linux side of the house. Anyway, and it sounds like our podcast had a bit of a tricky experience last night. So Eric, do let us know in the chat how you got on with that. Right then. Well,
I'm actually in the same boat. I've been moved down to the basement, out of my office, which is going to become a nursery. So that's pretty big news here in Slim PSV land. But yeah, so streaming from the basement, I definitely this looks professional thanks to Grace's wonderful designs and our new setup, but all around me is just sheer chaos. I basically moved everything. There's wires going everywhere. There's it's barely held together, and I hope a stiff breeze doesn't come through and knock everything apart, but if it does, we'll know what we did. So
well, there's a couple of things. First of all, your cone of clean is excellent, and I know how that goes because, just before Christmas, this room was literally a pile to the ceiling of boxes, just like out of shot of the camera. And talking of stiff breezes, we're expecting an epic storm here tonight. Yeah. So we were out battening down the things in the garden because we're expecting it to kick off here anytime soon. And you're getting congratulations in the chat as well. So yes.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, pretty big. We'll do a deep dive on that with some baby photos, obviously, when it happens and all that. But yeah, in the meantime, I got some painting to do. I got some streaming setup to do, and but it's pretty comfortable down here. I'm pretty happy with it. So.
Right then. So I think this is a return, and maybe. Not a grand finale, but a finale of our sort of Containers 101. So what are we going to be doing today?
It definitely has all of the makings for a potential grand finale, whether we complete it or not. We've left ourselves one last mountain to climb, I think. I did, because my stuff's not working. Your stuff seems to be working pretty well.
Well, we'll see.
That may be the famous last words. Yeah. But so... did a bunch of cleanup on the app, and I think this is going to be our last kind of Containers 101, famous last words, exactly. So I think this will be our last Containers 101, as long as we can kind of get this working. Maybe we'll do a little cleanup in office hours afterwards. But, as a reminder, we have now this very good looking front end that's done in Vue and Nuxt, and that's working really well. We have a simple but performant Flask backend API that just really talks to the database and serves images. Did a bunch of cleanup work on the database side, so that's working pretty well. A few little minor tweaks and stuff that we can do to kind of make it better, but that's pretty clean. So we've got a Postgres database, and today you're gonna put an Nginx. And I said that right finally. I've been told my pronunciation of certain technologies is not great, so it's Redis, not Redis, as our engineers were telling me from last week's stream where we did Go and Redis. But yeah, so Nginx, so we'll put that as a reverse proxy, and that's a pretty common pattern in applications. Is that right?
Indeed, yeah. So we're going to terminate, instead of exposing our web app on a random port number on a port address, we're going to have it terminate with a domain name. And like you say, that's a common pattern. And we're going to leave a little exercise for the reader in there, and maybe if we're going to do some cleanup in office hours, that sounds like a fun thing to do actually, because you've got a few tweaks you want to make. Maybe when I get to that exercise for the reader, maybe that's something we could take as an exercise to do in office hours as well. A little extra, extra push to sort of put a cherry on top. So we'll get to that. Right. Cool. So do you wanna go through where the app is and what you've been working on?
Yeah, I can do that for sure. So I think if we start in the IDE, I can just walk through sort of the changes to the Docker Compose file that have been made. Oh, I guess one other thing we can mention is we made a bunch of updates and cleaned up the actual GitHub repo where we store all of this. So if people have been kind of following along, unfortunately, some of the links are going to break, so we can, fix some of those as we go. But it makes a lot more sense now. Everything's kind of in this Containers 101 folder. And, you'll notice that everything is very clearly named and managed in a very logical and sequential order. So here you can see. And so this is number 9. We're going to do number 9 today, which is our last one. But I was just going to walk through some of the changes that I made in number 8 from our database update. So that's just kind of where we are. So just so you know, it's all there. We're going to make sure this is a really clean read and that people can follow it. Yeah. So the first thing that we did, so I'm over here in the Docker Compose file under number 8, and we did struggle a little more than we anticipated with this Postgres container the last time. But so we got this all cleaned up. We added sort of these relative paths to our volume, so they read nice and cleanly now. We added this init.sh script, which was sort of what we discovered late in the game, thanks to Mandy, who was on stream with us. I'm not sure if Mandy is here today, but thank you again for that. So Ian had also showed us that he had done this for his Postgres container. So this is just a neat little thing where you can actually initiate the database through a script. So I have this in a volume. It links into this Docker entry point initdb folder. The init script looks like this. I'm still kind of working out a little bit of an error with this one. But what this is doing is it basically just creates me a Docker user. But creates a database called photos, and then legacy one creates, grants some privileges for that one, and then it'll go through and it'll create the actual table in the database. That might have actually solved one of the issues that I was running into. So,
excellent. Make sure you save the file, in which case.
Yeah. So I also moved the database service up to be the first one that we had in the list. So it will actually fire up first. Okay. And added a few of these keyword terms like restart always, because if you remember in the last stream, we were having some kind of race condition-y type things because our Docker Compose file wasn't set up super great. Yeah. Did the same on the back end. The back end is the one that typically, because it's kind of waiting for the database, and when it gets the database, it can start doing its thing. So doing restart always there. And we added depends on database, so it should wait until that spins up. But again, there's some lag things that are happening there. But that backend's working really nicely now. It's on port 5000. We go down, and then we have the front end, here that builds. and we have the volumes here. We just added those. It's just kind of a cheat. It lets Docker know that the volumes are there, and it names them appropriately and everything. So it's nice and clean.
Yeah. Before you go
Yep.
a bit further, there's a couple of things here.
Yep.
So Monica likes your beanie, by the way. Yes, the Slim.AI swag is
Thank you.
excellent. So thank you for the compliments, Monica. Eric, this is our podcast, says that the reorg of the repository is a welcome enhancement. And in fact, that's just the start of it, because what we're going to do is we're going to move all of the tutorial wording into our discourse, which is at community.slim.ai. So if you're not signed up there, you can go and join up there. We're posting 1 or 2 technical articles there a week, but this entire series is going to go there, and then it will and we'll be using the GitHub purely for summary information of what each of the projects are, but linking back to the text in discourse, and basically the code repository will be GitHub. And if you spot we have made mistakes along the way, we're always open to people submitting PRs and what have you, and helping us Tipex out our mistakes. And then Takov says that he's noticed that on this live stream there's no transcoding available, so it's source quality only. Takov, we're not partnered, so it's a lucky dip as to whether or not your stream gets a transcoder allocation, and we've just been unlucky on this occasion. There's nothing we can do about that, unfortunately. So I think that's everything.
Learning together, it looks like Phil and Takov are suggesting unless stopped on the. I'm assuming that's on the restart, because restart always is pretty aggressive, right? It always restarts. So unless stopped, this would be another keyword that we can use here, right? And so, do you guys suggest I use it on all 3 of the services, or
That
there's any nuance
reasonable.
in there?
Yeah.
I'll put it in. Yeah. So then I guess if I'm explicitly stopping the containers, then that makes sense. So cool. All right. So that's what we did in the compose file. That makes a ton of sense. Did a bunch of stuff over here in the carousel, or actually like more so in this uploader component that we built in Vue, which, won't bore you guys too much with my ugly JavaScript, but basically, what we did was we created sort of a bit of a form. We post that using Axios back to the uploader, and just do some like timeout stuff. So that kind of completed the last circuit that we need to actually like do the uploads of images. And over in the carousel, we're getting stuff over from the database. I ran into a bunch of CORS issues, which was the thing I was running into this go round, and which cost us a little bit of a delay.
And what was the fix to that, by the way, just out of interest? Because you were gnashing your teeth and I was furiously
yeah. So in the end, so what I do is I pass some CORS, some headers on the Axios get and post calls.
Right.
I ended up making them really permissive in this example, but I can make those more specific to just the backend service and port, which is probably what I would lock down. And on this side, but it was actually both sides of the backend and the front end, because the push request goes from the front end to the backend. So the backend was also rejecting sort of the cross origin scripting.
Okay.
So we had already added CORS to the app.py. I'm doing that the wrong way. App.py script, but I had to make a few small tweaks there as well, and getting that right was a little confusing. So
excellent.
Yeah.
Monica thinks your JavaScript looks rustic, not ugly.
Rustic. Yeah, there we go. I thought it was going to be rusty, which I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to learn Rust as well in the background. So my syntax is, I miss the beautiful, simple days of Python syntax, so cool. So back end, front end, database is all working well now. And, if we go over to the web browser, there's a couple things that, you know, we just
Got a button
basically
for
have
that.
the app. There is one thing that's not working, which will be our final sort of debug, and it might be the kind of the golden spike of this whole project. I don't know. But, you know, we have this file uploader. I can come over to the screen. You can't see what I'm doing, but I'm uploading a T photo in this browser window. And then when I go and I click submit on the T, if I bounce actually back over to the browser window, I should be able to see.
I thought I am in the browser. Do you mean the
Or
IDE
sorry,
window?
back over to the IDE window.
Yeah.
Yep. I can see that this
Aha.
T image, I just uploaded that. So
Yeah.
that's working fine. What's not working fine is the data post back to the database. So I think what we should do is kind of got all this working. Let's hand it over to you, Martin, and talk about sort of the Nginx component. Now that
Okay.
we have sort of a front end and why we're going to do that. And then, you know, if we have time or maybe in office hours later, we'll just debug this last little piece of the data posting and we should be good to go.
So, yes, if I just move in here, so go over to my code editor, which is somewhere here. Here we go. So this is what we're going to be doing today, adding reverse proxy. And I suppose the best way to sort of explain why we're doing this is because we go and look at the front end, we can see our front end runs on port 3000, and as you well know, websites don't run on random ports on the internet. They run on well-known names. So we're going to be adding Nginx as a reverse proxy so that we can run our app on a host name, on a fully qualified name. So let's just head over to here. So let's go and have a look here. We've got, this is where all of the code is. So it's SlimDevOps on GitHub and Slim containers are the projects that we're working on. And as Pete pointed out, they're all ordered here. So here's Pete's updates he's just walked us through. So, and then here is what I'm about to talk through. And what I thought would be interesting is, I wonder if I can actually add these reverse proxy changes to Pete's example. So that's what we're going to have a look at. But if you want to follow along, the README that we're going to be looking at is this one here. So this is what I'm going to be using as the crib sheet for how we actually do this. So let's take a look in here. Let's do this.
Asking if we're using the official Nginx image or if we're using the Linux server IO implementation. So Linux server IO, for people who don't know, is like this really awesome community of Linux enthusiasts. They have a great Discord channel. They produce their own images, which are really awesome ones to work with.
Yeah.
In this case, we're just using the official Nginx image. Is that right, Martin?
No, we're not. neither of those projects, in fact. Okay. So let's actually go and show what we're using here. So I'll bring up the image. So rather, I will bring up the URL so we can go and take a look. So I found this project, which is, when you go looking for how to do this, this is one of these well-established projects that's well maintained, frequently updated, and it's called Nginx Proxy, and it's pretty nifty because it auto-magically does all of the reverse proxying magic for you, including introspection into your containers in your Docker Compose to automatically figure out what ports they're exposed on, so that you can say, I want this container to be known by this name, and it magically does all of the right stuff. So this is the project I'm using. Now, we did start off when we started working on this. In fact, Pete started working on it. You were using the official Nginx container, and we had a bespoke configuration. But when I saw this, I was like, oh, this is quite elegant, and we'll get into why this is elegant in just a moment. So if we come back over here, here's the README. So we're going to be adding this reverse proxy, and we're just going to be serving up our web app front end on port 80. for now. Okay, and we'll get to some more of that in a moment. So for this, we obviously need Docker and Docker Compose, and then here's the key bit of information. You need DNS entries that point to the location where your host is going to actually reverse proxy to. And when we get to that step, I'll explain exactly what I've done there. For the purposes of this example, we've kept it simple. And hang on a moment, just a moment.
Popular enough to be getting targeted by bots.
Yep, there we go. That's done. Right then. So I'll explain, but we haven't done the DNS thing. We've got a simpler solution so this can be reproduced by anyone on their own machine. So I've explained we're using this project called Nginx Proxy. So what we need to do is add a new entry, a new container to our compose file. And, this is an example of what it looks like. So I'm going to copy and paste this. We'll paste it into the compose file from your project. And I will then explain what we're doing here. So what have we got? Well, first of all, we're giving it a name and the image that we're using and a container name proxy. And we are exposing port 80. So this thing is going to listen on port 80. And then this volume here, as I understand it, this is so this container can introspect the other containers to determine the ports that they're listening on. So it can do its magic to bind to names. And we'll get into how that works. And then this volume,
that's basically connecting the Docker socket on the local host into the Docker sock on the in the container.
So it can communicate and introspect. Cool. Yeah. And then this is the path where this is a mount for the application itself, the Nginx Proxy app, to build its dynamic configuration of Nginx rules based on what it learns about the configuration that you pass to it. And we're going to be defining a network specifically for this proxy. So that's what we need there. So so I've explained what's going on here, and then we need to add this proxy net to our networks, and it's using the bridge driver, which ensures that this is exposed on the host. So it's not a natted thing. It's actually exposing that network on the host machine. So we will save those two things there.
I've got one preemptive bug fix for you that was just sloppy on my part that I know I did wrong, which is double check and make sure the database container is also part of that PhotoNet network, because I think I missed that or I forgot to do it. So we didn't previously need the networks, right? Because we're all just on one network. So we could omit that. I added it because I was trying to learn about that keyword a little bit more. But if I don't add it to all of them, right, then they actually, the reason you would do that is because you would have multiple networks running. So if I wanted my front end and back end in one network, my database in another network, I could do that. I would need to get them to talk to each other. But in this case, we want all three of those in the same network. So by declaring the keyword, we just need to make sure it's all in the same network. And, and we have that here.
So welcome to Cassie Dev. Hello, welcome back to the stream. And Takov has a question, so I'm just going to bring that up. So Takov asks, does the backend and database have its own segmented internal network, by the way? No, the backend and the database speak on the same network, the Docker network, as the front end app. We've not got too sophisticated with the segregation of the networks. That's definitely something that you can do. And even things like, we do it here, although the reasons aren't obvious, although it will become apparent a bit later. Things like mounts. I'm doing something new here. exposing the Docker socket is actually that's quite a powerful thing that you can go poking around in. So that here we see the :RO on the end here. So this container has read-only access to that socket. So it means that this container can't go messing around with the other instances that are running under this Docker runtime. So that's
back off, like what would be the reason between, or Martin, if you know, like what would be the reason for running backend and front end, backend and database together, and then front end as a separate network? Is that just to keep sort of the data sort of contained between one thing, and then the front end's more likely to be exposed to the internet and potential bad actors? And
Indeed, what you're doing there is you're preventing the scope for island hopping. The fewer sort of network interconnection points that don't need to exist, then if you do get compromised, you limit the impact. Gotcha. Okay, cool. Right then, so we've added the network piece, and if we go back to our documentation, that's kind of it. So now what we need to do is we have our front end web app, our photo app, and now we need to tell this app to use our Nginx proxy. So we are going to be adding these things here. So first of all, our front end app needs to depend upon the Nginx proxy. So let's go and do this. So we'll find the front end. We'll put all of this underneath here so it can all sit together. So we're going to do that piece. Oops. And then this is where the magic of Nginx proxy comes from. So I will explain these as I've pasted them in. So Nginx proxy looks for these environment variables in the containers. And if I go back to the README here, you'll see here the main requirement, the single requirement that Nginx proxy needs is the environment variable virtual host. It has to be specified, and this tells the reverse proxy which address will be routed to the appropriate containers. So the virtual host here, we're going to have our front-end application list, being addressable by example.local. Now, I've also said virtual port equals 3000. Now, as it happens, I don't need to do that because our front-end application only listens on a single port, which is port 3000. If we go and look here, there it is. But if our application listened on more than one port, this is something that I've encountered recently. We've been creating game servers. So those game servers listen on multiple ports. What you can do here is list the multiple ports that the app is addressable by. Now, I've included this for completeness, but if your container is only listening on a single port, you don't need to do that because the Nginx proxy will introspect that.
Cool.
And then we obviously need to tell it what network it's communicating over. So we'll go and add that to our list. In fact, we don't need to. Yeah, we'll do that. In fact, there we go. So that our front end is now exposing itself to the reverse proxy, and then here I just listed what the complete Docker file would look like, but I'm just going to skip over that now, and we're going to get down to, well, how do we actually start these things? Now, this is an important piece here. This requires DNS to work. This would be where, for example, let's imagine our front-end web app is a website. It's Slim.AI. We would need Slim.AI to have DNS entries and all of that good stuff. So I'm cheating. What I'm doing is we're going to be using example.local, which is on my machine. So instead of having to go and update, actual DNS, I've cheated and I've edited my local hosts file, and I've added an entry like this. So I've got a loopback address of 127.0.2.1, and that resolves the name example.local and also all the W's example.local. Because this technique that we're using here, we've just got front end here, but let's imagine that we had this. I'm not going to leave this in for long, but let's call this let's imagine we had APIs running on a different thing, right? So this would be photo API and the image would be photo API, and it comes from, none of this exists, but let's imagine for a moment that we have an API project and this listens on 3001 and 3001. We could then do something like this, API dot and 3001, and there we go. So that is how we could then have multiple containers in here with different subdomains operating different services and containers. So we don't have that really cool granularity, but that's how we could do this if we had multiple endpoints we wanted to route to.
Cool.
And that single Nginx proxy container that's part of our, orchestrated compose, it knows how to, do all of this and route things accordingly. So it's pretty groovy. I'll remove that because it was a transient example.
That is cool. I've always wondered how those subdomains work and that routing and all of that happens. So we can make cookies.slimphotoapp.net or whatever.
Yeah, indeed. You're right. Yeah, t.slim.ai, cookies.slim.ai.
Yes. Swag.slim.ai, I think would do quite well, to be honest.
So I've already set up this. So if I just go down here and if I ping example.local, hopefully this still works. There we go. So we're getting a response off 127.0.2.1. And there it is. So now what we'll do is I'm inside your project. So I'm going to build this Docker Compose and ask it to start the services. So we're going to say Docker Compose up, daemonize everything. So put it into the background and rebuild all of the containers. Now I did pre-cache all of this because we've got a multi-container project. We've got gigabytes of oops, what did I miss? Oh, hello. I've got a typo in my instructions. There we go. Let's fix that. We'll push that up afterwards. There we go. So we'll let that run. Let's just push that up so we can see what it's doing. Hopefully it shouldn't have to pull too much stuff. I did run this earlier.
Yeah, I wonder if it with the update that we did right before the stream, as I was kind of
it will have detected that you've pushed some changes. Yeah. So some of these containers will need rebuilding entirely.
Yeah, generally when demos don't work and something goes wrong, it's usually my fault. So I think we'll just keep that streak going. So that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. So I'm just looking through the chat here. So Takov was also helping explain some of the reasons why you would segregate those networks.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask, so how would you do that with networks then? Because that's always been a little confusing to me. So would you have the back end, in this case, you'd have a network for sort of the database in the back end, let's call that the back end network. And you'd have one for the front end, which we would call the front end network.
Yeah.
And so what I would do is I would put the back end service in both of those networks, and that's how it talks to the front end.
You'd put the back end service in the front end net and the back end net, and you'd put the back end container and the database container in the back end net, and that means that the front end doesn't have a network to the database server.
Got it. That makes sense. So if your network gets compromised, then basically it would still be able to access the backend, but it wouldn't be able to get a network connection back to the database.
And as we've noted in our backend, if we were doing this for real, we'd have something like S3 as the image store. So, there would be no requirement even for the the back-end app to have a requirement for that volume at all. You know, that could be
Cool.
another network it's segregated.
Cool.
Right then. So Eric has a comment here. So Eric says, I use a Docker suite of containers for my system setup, and I often have to restart them to ensure the API is online for OBS. That would be a fun deep dive in the future. Yeah, including putting OBS inside a Docker container. I did start doing that. I started to hate my life a little bit, but it was possible to get the get the basics going. Right, so we've got this running, and hopefully it's up and running. So if I do a docker ps-a, we should see we've got a bunch of containers running on different ports. So here we've got the back end running on port 5000, we've got the front end on 3000, the database server, and then our proxy on port 80. So if we head over to a web browser here, we should be able to go to example.local. I will probably have to be explicit on the protocol. And there is your application running on example.local.
Cool.
So here's the carousel. I don't have the images, of course, because I won't have the images because those have been uploaded to the volume that you've got access to.
Right, that
I don't.
And haven't been adding those.
So, but there is the application. Now, can anyone spot what the elephant in the room is? I'll give you a moment just to consider what the obvious oversight might be in the way we're doing our reverse proxy. I'm offering swag to the first person in chat that comes up with a sensible answer as to the massive oversight. Phil Clifford is a winner. Phil says HTTPS. Indeed. That is obviously what we're missing here. So this is our exercise for the reader piece of the of today's tutorial. So let me just move back to the README. It is not difficult to actually add HTTPS, and when you're doing production deployments, you will absolutely want to be having your reverse proxy working on port 80 unencrypted and working on port 443 for TLS encrypted data using something like Let's Encrypt. And I found another project which is a companion to Nginx Proxy, which is all of the Let's Encrypt stuff baked in. So let's just head over to here and take a look at this project very quickly. Their Docker Hub README explains what you need to do, but this is another container that you can add to your Docker Compose, which will communicate with Nginx Proxy again over a separate network to automatically generate certificates. But in order to do that, your host has to be accessible on the actual internet on ports 80 and 443, and you actually have to have actual DNS working and a bunch of other things. And for the purposes of this tutorial, we start getting into, you know, the fabric and the infrastructure of the actual internet, and it's a bit too much of a heavy lift. But everything you need to know is here. And I've given enough pointers on where to get started in the README. So we've outlined here from their documentation. So what I propose is tomorrow, when we're doing a little bit of mop-up, maybe we can set this up somewhere on the actual internet with actual host names, and we can do all of this and actually get a fully encrypted, automatically renewing certificates in our container as well.
Cool. Yeah. Eric says, I admit I get confused with all the various choices of SSL certificate containers, so trying this one out is cool. I can't echo that more. I usually sort of give up once it comes to SSL, and I power my way through, and I find one way to do it that works, and then I just do that all the time. And if I ever break it, then I have to like relearn the whole thing again. So, but
Yeah. I really like this solution. So I've recently set up Let's Encrypt on a server that we've been working on as a community project, entirely separate from this. And it's quite straightforward, but actually having that stuff on the host, it pollutes quite a lot of stuff. It's good. It's an invaluable tool, but having it inside a container that talks to a reverse engine proxy with magic in between that makes all of this stuff work is just fantastic. And I thoroughly enjoyed looking up these utilities and how they integrate with one another to really demystify this. I mean, you do still need to know what DNS is and how to correctly configure DNS, but that's kind of the start and the end of it, because all of the rest of the complexity of setting up SSL and TLS certificates completely goes away, because this will auto renew. It does all of the automatic challenge completion, so it's pretty nifty. I thought this was cracking good.
That is great. That's a great find, and kind of cool this all came together. I mean, I love that we have sort of like what feels like a very robust app. I mean, I think we could add some caching layers to it. Like you said, we'd need the file store obviously for the images and an S3 bucket, and we'd want to configure that. But we're pretty close to a pretty good app, and we could obviously add some more stuff to the front end or add some new routes to the back end and everything. But feels pretty complete to me, so I'm feeling pretty good about where we are. If we can get the database working. So
I'm sure we'll have good success with that. Maybe we'll I'm sure I think
almost
go on.
I'm sure it's a typo. I'm sure it's a stupid typo that I made.
So yeah, maybe we'll rope in some assistance from the engineering team and just get an assist. And like we were saying earlier, we're looking to now update the guides to kind of be a bit more consistent and flowing, and then we'll get all of that into discourse. I will make those wiki posts, so if people spot mistakes or think of good additions, for example, we've already added an addition to this one, which is we're reverse proxying to port 80, but this is how you do SSL. Then people can add that additional context and information to those posts in the future, which will be nifty.
Yeah. And I think like something I'm pretty excited about. So I think so where do we go from here, right? We're getting our app into a place where, I mean, you said like we could put this up somewhere and have it run. And if we did that on Heroku or something like that, a lot of that would be managed. But if we did it in a very sort of cloud native type way, now we're getting into the realm of DevOps and, sort of CI/CD pipeline and observability and scanning and testing and all of that kind of stuff. So our thought, I'm curious what the chat has to say about it, but was to now transition from sort of containers 101. We've covered off what we can in containers. We've got some good facility with that. Let's switch to a DevOps 101, right? What are we going to do with these containers? So let's start doing some stuff with them. Obviously, we'll be doing some slimming stuff with Docker Slim and a few other tools and stuff like that we'll be showing later on. But, next week, we're going to have Brendan O'Leary here with us from GitLab. And GitLab is going to be right at the tail end of their hackathon.
Right.
So I think what we'll do is actually build a CI pipeline for this thing next week with GitLab, and we actually have a tutorial on the Slim blog that does that on Google Cloud. So we could actually like host something on Google Cloud, push this app up there through a CI pipeline, and then anytime we're making changes or we want to ship code to production, we're actually doing that. There's a lot of other options that we could do from there. So kind of curious what the chat has to say about, like, and maybe let us know in Discord or in chat. Maybe we'll figure out a way of doing a poll, but like, what types of DevOps things would people want to learn? What could we do as part of that DevOps 101 that might be interesting? I mean, CI pipeline's obviously the first kind of thing that comes to mind, but there's things like testing, security, vulnerability scanning. That's obviously something that we'll need to do. Continuous deployment, like what does that look like? I don't know that we get as far as Kubernetes, but maybe we could. I don't know.
I think the Kubernetes piece is after the DevOps piece. I think then we move into like hybrid cloud and cluster deployments and all of that sort of thing. So Phil says CI/CD with test-driven DevOps, and I think that's kind of what we've got in mind. And the thing I'm most interested in doing with that is, I suppose it's the CI/CD piece. If I make a change to my Docker file, what are the pieces that I need to have in place for that to automatically construct a new image and then deploy it somewhere on the public internet so that that new updated service is available? I'd like to take that all the way through. But something that we've touched on in the past, but not here, actually with the CCNF when we did a workshop on their Twitch channel, was looking at SBOM analysis and security scanning. And I'd like to tie those things into that whole deployment pipeline. Maybe having some gates on, well, let's not deploy this because we've found something concerning in the analysis we've just done. Yeah.
And I'm kind of curious to explore all of the different platforms. We're working on connectors in the Slim.AI platform. So we have AWS ECR and we have Google Container Registry, of course, but we're adding more as we go. And GitLab and GitHub are kind of like on our roadmap. I'm not sure exactly when we'll have those available, but so there's GitHub Actions, that's a way of building CI. There's GitLab, obviously, which is what we use. And Brendan is an advisor of ours, so we know that one really well. There's Circle CI, which is a really nice platform, it gets really great reviews from people. So there's that. And then there's sort of, kind of more legacy approaches like Jenkins and stuff like that. So we could really do some investigation of all the different options that you have in those areas. I love the idea of doing testing too. I'm terrible about writing tests. So I think like spending some time on testing would be really good, and looking at some of the platforms or open source projects that are available for that, I think would be really awesome. So good idea there.
It's been a while for me since I've used all of the CI/CD offerings. I mostly these days use GitHub Workflows, GitHub Actions. So it would be interesting to do the same, commit to a project, have that Docker image or collection of Docker images rebuilt and deployed, and do that in GitHub, GitLab, Jenkins, Circle CI, maybe others. Let's not get too carried away, but then compare the experiences of using those different platforms and where some are stronger than others maybe, or where you might choose to use one over the other because it has particular features or capabilities that suit a particular application class. So I'm looking forward to digging into that one.
Yeah, and one of the things, I know we have a blog post coming on, I think it should be ready kind of, the timing should be pretty good in a couple months, or like a couple weeks from now, is using GitHub Actions to fire a Docker Slim minification of your container. Obviously there's a ton of gotchas there. It's not trivial to do it, but we'll have a little blog post that shows that, and I think that'll be a nice lead into some other things that we're working on that people might want to see. So.
And in fact, as you mentioned that, let's just plug a little article that I have written recently, because I know it segues with work that Eric has done before. So over on community.slim.ai, I wrote this piece, which is about using Docker Slim probes and includes in order to better exercise your containers during the minification process, so that you don't miss vital assets out of your containers that may result in your container not working. So there's the first of the technical pieces that we're adding here. So I do encourage you to come on over and sign up. You'll then get notified of all the new stuff that we're publishing over there.
Yeah, and Eric mentioned one of his ideas was the highly available data processing pipeline. I think data processing in general is just like something that would be cool. It's a little further afield, but we'll be doing a couple things with sort of more data orientated apps. Like one, we've been talking with some of the people over at Confluent, who is the company behind Apache Kafka, and they ship a ton of containers. They have a lot of that going on. So I think maybe taking a look at some of their containers and how you set up Kafka and for data processing, that's like a totally different realm. And then I think like taking a deeper dive into some of the AI and ML containers from an ML ops type perspective would be interesting for us as well. I know we did the container report data, but we haven't like spent a ton of time with those containers since we did the R podcasts, kind of our shiny app. So yeah, getting back to that would be awesome.
Yeah, it was interesting doing that one with Eric, because it was in the days before we had taken the veil off the diff and explore features of the platform. So it was all like, we used a tool to analyze this. Now of course that's all available for anyone to use at Slim.AI. Portal.slim.dev in fact is where you want to go for that. Right, okay, are we I think we've wrapped that up. So tomorrow we'll do a office hours, and we'll just do a bit of tidy up and clean up on this and have a crack at Let's Encrypt maybe.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I'll probably jump in on the early side and try to get my database action happening and update my README file and stuff like that. So if people want to debug with me, maybe I'll be on kind of earlier in the day, East Coast time. And you want to jump in and do the Let's Encrypt, I'd be curious to see that. So yeah,
that'll be good fun, I think. Right, cool. Well, thank you everyone for stopping by. Above my head is our website, Slim.AI, and on that website you will find links to our Discord, where we will be doing the office hours. So let me just go and look that up very quickly.
While you're doing that, I see Monica mentions overheard my team chat. We don't talk about Bruno or Kubernetes. I will admit I am a little behind the curve on the whole Bruno thing, but Brendan O'Leary, who's coming on with us next week and is from GitLab, he streams over at O'Leary Crew on Twitch, so you could give him a follow. He is building a Bruno bot that basically scans the whole of Twitter, as far as I can tell. Using Go, he's using it to learn Go. And so if you tweet /Bruno anywhere on Twitter, you'll get a response from the TO Bruno bot. And maybe Brendan can take us through that next week. So definitely check that out over at O'Leary Crew. If you haven't seen it already, it's pretty fun. So
I've just put a link to Brendan's Twitch channel in our
here we
chat.
Go. Sorry about that.
Ang is talking to me in my head. I've just muted that. Right. Okay. Well, none of our friends are streaming. They were, but they have finished before we got to the end of our stream. So we're gonna nip it in the bud there. Hopefully, we'll see some of you in office hours tomorrow. Join our Discord. We will announce it in the general chat when we're going to be fiddling around with things. And your help and assistance is always required when we tinker with those things. So we hope to see you there.
Yeah, thanks Takeoff and Phil Clifford. I learned a bunch from you guys about networking today, so that was really fun. So cool. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone. See you soon. Bye-bye.
See ya.